Hi, everyone. Good morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you're listening. Welcome to this week's episode of DappRadar Market Movers. Your host here, Pedro, and today with me, Boris Ribo, part of the research team. How you doing, Boris?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much.
And actually, we're going to talk about today the report that you just published earlier this week about the current state of gaming. What were the main factors and insights that we could observe forming in this category during Q2? Just before we start, I want to remind everyone that, as always, we will be recording the session so you guys can listen to this or any of our previous shows on DappRadar's YouTube channel, where you will also find hundreds of educational videos, market updates, and content from our other shows. And yeah, let's start. So, I would like to ask Boris, you wrote a report. What are the main observations, the most important insights that we can start talking about blockchain games and how they are reacting to the crypto winter that we are currently living?
Well, in the bigger sense, I can say. Sorry, I heard some other sound. Okay, yeah, sorry, I'll start from the beginning. So the biggest sense is that unfortunately, blockchain games are starting to feel the effects of the bear market. I'm not gonna say recession because we're not into that yet, but yeah, the bear market is starting to hit us. Although the results, I'll say, are inconclusive. So just from a top-down perspective, the of all unique active wallets that are present on the crypto markets and with all the different verticals of the crypto industry that they're interacting with, those being DeFi, games, and NFT, games are still a vast majority. And they actually, since last quarter, they increased their share by 3 percentage points. There were 49 in Q1. They have increased it to 52% in this quarter. Although in the total amount of unique active wallets that are present, we saw a pullback of 7%, but of the actual unique active wallets themselves, we saw a pullback of 17%. So we're starting a slight pullback. However, the situation is twofold. I would say mostly we are in the middle of summer. June, end of May is when most people are starting to go on holidays. Many people who are in school are having their final exams. So not a lot of people are playing games. That's one way I'd explain it. Another way I'd explain is that June has historically been recorded as one of the worst months this year so far. The Federal Reserve has raised rates to the point that we haven't seen since the 80s by 0.75 points, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, we also hit the inflation has hit 9%, at least in the US. Depending on where you're from, it can be even higher. Some places in Central and Eastern Europe have hit as high as 16%. So it remains quite a grim picture. Naturally, that would have effects on blockchain games, but overall, we're still looking quite good.
So yeah, the macroeconomic picture is it's quite difficult right now. Yeah, it was Tuesday or yesterday when the U.S. announced a yearly inflation in the United States. Of course, that dragged down all the basically all the traction that the crypto was trying to gain again, and the market, of course, crashed down. And we're expecting it to continue that way, probably towards the end of the year. So crypto winter, bear market, totally confirmed. But I think you made a really good point here. And one of the most important metrics that we measured and showed to you guys in DappRadar is unique active wallets, right? So this represents and can give us an estimate of how much people is using specific dApps. An interesting finding that 52% of the DApp industry activity, so from all the dApps that we are currently tracking, from the most of 2,000 dApps that we're currently tracking, 52% of the blockchain activity is coming from games. And looking from the previous quarter, yeah, the activity is down. I think you said 7%, right?
Yeah, this is a tricky thing to wrap around, so I'll reiterate it again. Of the total wallets that we tracked that interacted with everything, the pullback has been 7% of the total wallets, but from the wallets interacted to previous quarter within the gaming vertical, that has been 17%. So very important to differentiate the two figures.
Yeah, so for me, it's also interesting to see. Of course, DeFi has been one of the most slashed categories because it's really related to crypto price, token action, and especially since the collapse of Terra, right? But we see that DeFi is losing around 20% of the usage from the previous quarter, which is a significant drop. Then NFTs are more or less on the same line. And when you compare the 7% drop in the games, you can make a sense that it's been generating resistance to the harsh market conditions, which is, I would say, the first bullish point that we currently observe here in games, right? But there are other factors and other insights that can tell us how bullish the future of blockchain gaming is. And actually, the topic of around today's conversation is how blockchain games are siphoning the talent and capital from traditional media and from the traditional industry. And why don't we start explaining also what does this means? Because this is an important event that it's happening. There is an exodus of talent, really talented individuals that help develop popular franchises. We're talking about Microsoft and Bungie with Halo. We're talking about these big games are now, migrating into the blockchain industry. They're forming their own blockchain gaming studios, and they are contributing to the future of this industry. And in the same way, we are seeing a record amount of capital invested by venture capitals mainly, but also by retail investors. These are two important things to mention. Why don't you tell us more about what you saw here?
One thing I wanted to add, for example, another very big thing that happened is that one of the top execs at Activision Blizzard, Mark Aubrey, has quit the company and he's moved to Pantheon Gaming to develop Web3 games. He's been the developer for their Asian markets, so New Zealand, Japan, Korea, India, and many others. And he, as I said, joined Pantheon Gaming. So what happens is that in the traditional gaming industry, it's still a relatively young industry. I mean, it started like if you consider the modern industry when it became big, it started at the end of 20th century, so in late 90s, and I'd say it really like broke into its own in the early 2000s. So the industry itself is relatively young. It's maybe like 20, 30 years.
35 years.
Yeah, 30 years tops. So, and even then, in that very, very short amount of time, it has, I would say, already grown stagnant. For the first time, a lot of the major publishers, they are struggling. Activision Blizzard itself has been looking for buyouts, possibly by Microsoft. Possibly by Sony. We're saying Take-Two Interactive also has posted negative numbers. Blizzard itself as a company is one of the major publishers, and also myself as a gamer, I grew up with a lot of Blizzard games, be it Warcraft, Diablo, Starcraft, even their Viking games on the console. Now it's been honestly just spiraling the drain. And it happens a lot. Also, there's been a huge debacle with CD Projekt Red, the creators of the Witcher series, and I was going to say Microsoft, but I didn't want to say Microsoft. Now, Cyberpunk 2077, the game has been deemed a complete disaster. It's been delisted from the Sony online store. So why am I saying you this? Is that essentially video games are a business, and in order for the business to be profitable, you have to create something and then sell it many times, so that profit is then goes to the company, goes to the shareholders, and then it gives you a bigger budget to create something bigger in the future. But the bigger your budget becomes, the more the harder it is to recoup the losses. So when you invest like I know $1 million into a game and then it returns you 20 million, that's one thing. But then if you invest 20 million into the game, you have to earn 60 or 100 million for it to recoup. So your margin of your winnings is constantly decreasing. Whether compared to Web3 games, you don't need that big of a team. You, like, for example, on most of the AAA titles, and AAA titles, those are by today's standards, anything that's got above 1 million in funding, you can have teams that are the size of small towns. You can have teams from like 100 to 500 people, sometimes even in the thousands, probably. But in blockchain games like Sky Mavis, they're a team of less than 50 people.
Yeah.
In some games, even lower. Some people, they're literally just a team of like 5 or 10 friends. They all sit together in a single office. It's absolutely much easier to fund such an endeavor. You have a lot more creative flexibility in what you can create. You are essentially pioneering a completely new market. So it's also exciting, wherein you try all sorts of things that work and that don't work, and it's a very fulfilling perspective for many of the new developers. Also, one of the biggest, and I would say this is the biggest issue why a lot of the developers are leaving traditional media, is just churn, because a lot of people, especially Cyberpunk is the biggest example for this. The game got delayed 3 times, and many of the developers had to physically sleep in the development space. Like they started like a small little tent town in their office, because they were just working 24 hours about the game. So it's understandable when you churn a little bit near the end of the game, but when you start doing it for months and years, it's not a lifestyle that many people can support for an extended period of time.
Oh, and also let's be very honest. Like the
Sorry, trying.
potential of so you were mentioning that gaming is massive industry, and just in perspective, right now I think in 2021 the gaming industry was estimated to generate around 220 billion in revenue, estimated to grow to 300 billion industry by 2027. So we're talking about a 300 billion market here. And when you start combining this with the potential of a disruptive technology such as blockchain, and the ability to first democratize the access to people, right? And second, like how important is to make an impact in people's life, that the paradigm shift where people can start earning while playing is really powerful. So video games are part of our human nature, and it's something that we have been doing by our anthropological needs since the start of man. Then in the 80s, in the 70s, Sega and it was mainly Sega. Then in the 80s, Nintendo and Atari, they start popularizing video games, and people start to immerse in these digital realities, just as an escape from what was happening in real life. So again, it's tackling this human factor and making a need out of it. And if you can entertain yourself and you can see that you can start earning some money, like the potential is really powerful. And this is something that venture capitals, big enterprises like Animoca brands have really start to notice. And the amount of money flowing into blockchain games is also very relevant. What are the numbers of investments made this quarter into blockchain games, for example?
So On that, it depends the way you count it. I mean, there's some wiggle room in the way you appraise everything. But so far, we are still on track to perform the same way as we did last quarter. So by our internal well, not estimation, by our internal count, 2.5 billion got invested last quarter. And by again, this is where we're still debating what counts as investment, what not. So it's land sales, venture capital investments and whatnot. So we're between 2.5 and 2.8. So we're exactly the same as we were last year, if not 11% more that we had in the previous quarter. And we already have surpassed the total amount of investments that have been done in the last year, which was 4 billion. Moreover, also some very good news is that the projections for the end of this year have also increased by 20%. So last quarter, we expected the overall yearly investments to be 10 billion. Now they're slated to be 12 billion. And who knows, maybe by the end of next quarter, it's going to be 15 and maybe even 20. We'll see. But so far, just the nature of blockchain games, I wouldn't say forces, but it compels a lot of people to see its potential, see its growth, and invest into its future. In the recent study posted by Citibank, they appraised the not only blockchain gaming, but the connected metaverse of games, NFTs, and the general crypto markets into trillions of dollars in the next 8 years. So by 2030, trillions.
Yeah, huge.
So that I would say that's a very optimistic estimate, but nevertheless, that is still something that we're striving for. And to touch upon what you said previously, is that playing games and earning money. That's like a lot of people scoff at that idea, but it's essentially what we're doing now anyway, with the emergence of streaming platforms like Twitch. People are doing it. They've been doing Let's Plays a little earlier, like in around 2014, 2016, before Twitch became a thing. People were watching Let's Plays. So playing games and earning money is not such a far-fetched idea. Hell, even before that, on Steam, people have been trading hats in Team Fortress and various other games. Have been trading various end-game items with each other. But the problem is that the internally managed marketplace was managed by the company. So when it came to Team Fortress and other games by Valve, all the money went to Valve. So anytime you do a transaction, Valve takes a cut from it. But when you have a giant open decentralized market space, like something we have in OpenSea or where else, well, actually OpenSea also takes a cut from all the proceeds, but at least there you can have transactions irrespective of the game that you're on. If you want to sell, I don't items for your character in one game, you can sell it to anybody. They don't have to be specifically be present inside of the a specific infrastructure, just as long as they're on an Ethereum wallet. And I think that would be great for the games in the future. The only issue would be is the interoperability between an item in one game and it being ported to another. For example, I know you have a sword in one game, but if you want to move it to another game that also will accept that sword, so I guess it has to be rebalanced and its stats have to be somehow also ported. But that's still something, way of solving issues. For example, another thing that happened recently is that Ubisoft has closed down the servers for a lot of their old games. All the Splinter Cell series, all the Assassin's Creed series. So essentially, the games have become abandonware. If something like that happens to your old games and developers say, well, you know what, we don't want to support them anymore, what you could do, and then a new developer comes along or the community decides to take over, you could still have your items, and your items could be part of your wallet. And then whenever the community takes over and creates something new, maybe builds an add-on, builds an expansion, or completely revamps the process, the digital imprint that, hey, I had this character had such and such equipment. Maybe it's not going to be one-to-one the equipment, but they can create the equipment based on your old character in the new game. So that essentially tracks your performance and your acquisitions, regardless of regardless of video game.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the main advantages of implementing blockchain in industries such as gaming. It basically enables a new free market where people can freely trade their game assets that they have already purchased and they own. It's built for the community rather than for decentralized entities that want to get all the lion's share of the revenues. You see, like the marketplace fees in looks rare in X2Y2. These community-driven marketplaces that are offering better rates, better fees than OpenSea, right? And this is going to be also something that we see in games. And you started talking about interoperability, which is a whole different conversation, but still interesting and relevant for games. So I'm going to add something on that. This is also one of the most important characteristics of the Web3 metaverse. Truly interconnected virtual world, virtual reality, where you can sim from one place to another. And talking specifically about interoperability on games, I think this is the part where we are the farthest from being optimal, and it's only because the technical challenges that arises from truly interoperable games. And you were laying down the example of having a sword in the sandbox and then using the same sword in another blockchain game. How can you really program? You would need consensus between developers. So my sword does the same amount of damage here in my game, that this sword is going to do that same amount of damage in your game. So to get that level of interoperability is still a few years from now. But what we are already seeing is, like, for example, I can spawn into the sandbox using my Cyberconk's avatar voxel version. And then I can use it also in World Wide Web, and I can use it also in voxels and so on. That's the type of interoperability that is truly exciting, and it's already live in some of the virtual worlds, blockchain virtual worlds. But as far as for games, it's going to be a real challenge to get truly interoperable gaming ecosystem.
Certainly, but it's not a pipe dream. I mean, again, I hate to bring this already. Like we are already on the cusp of it doing. Like there's the proof is in the pudding. For example, take Fortnite. I think is one of the most played games right now. They literally have partnered with every single thing under the sun. They had John Wick. They had uh, Thanos. They had all the X-Men. They basically have everything that is anything inside of the game. So if you wanted to play as any potential given character that you could possibly imagine, you can. And then there's nothing stopping you from anything like the same thing happening where within blockchain games. The only difference would be that, hey, if for example one community or one project is led by X amount of people, they have to talk with X amount other people and talk with each other. And I'm sure that if they were built on the same blockchain or within the same metaverse, of course they can interpolate between one and another. So the building blocks for this transition are already laid down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's more about getting, like, as I said, agreement between how can I collaborate with other game studios. That collaboration is really open and really, yeah, you can see true collaboration here in the Web3 space. But still, I think it's going to be a challenge. Hopefully, we'll get that level of interoperability soon. It could be really, really fun to use weapons from one game into another one. It could really be fun. But let's see how that evolves. And also positive, going back to the investments discussion, we deviate a bit. um, I also see a positive that guilds incubators are getting a good chunk of this money because they will act as healthy bodies within the blockchain universe. And why is this? Because they will incentivize the startup process of new game studios. They bring new and fresh mind and capital to the industry. And most importantly, they allow people that might be priced out. If you remember, at some point in Q2 of in Q3 and Q4 in the second half of last year, the entry barrier for Axie Infinity was really steep. You need to spend around 600, 700, even $1,000 at some point to buy 3 Axie pets and start playing the game. So a lot of people in emerging economies and, well, basically worldwide were priced out. So the role that guilds are playing and will be playing more actively, in my opinion, in the next months and years, is also really, really powerful from the social standpoint, where people can get real democratized access to these type of games through the scholarships that guilds are offering. So it's also good to see in your report that guilds are getting a good amount of the investment capital raised by metaverse and blockchain projects.
Absolutely, and yeah, sorry.
No, go.
I was going to say when it comes to also capital, is the reason I'm saying is that monetization of blockchain games, because they're so small. I want to highlight the idea is that it's a lot. Like, yes, you're building into something that's completely new, and you have a lot of initial steps to take and initial mistakes to do. But then you scale into absolutely new markets where the sky is the limit. So as part of an investment, and we're talking about venture capitals, then they usually invest not to get like an extra 10-20% per annum. We're talking about I invest for the next 5-10 years, and I gain potentially 100 times my initial investment. So this is something that you can't do right now in traditional gaming, because if you're investing into something, there's a lot of competition, or the project is not proven, or
Yeah,
there's always something that won't work.
yeah,
Yeah, sorry.
and this is no, and actually, this is another good point of guilds. How they act as a secure place. Like the same thing goes with DappRadar. When you're trying to play a new game, like for example this new game of Solana that maybe we can talk about a bit later. I tried to go in Google and I saw like 2 or 3 ads that are obviously scams. So guilds exploring a game through a guild, exploring a game through DappRadar allow you to really connect to the real app instead of failing into scams, fake apps, and so on. So again, it's a healthy process and role that they are playing. So and for me, it's another bullish indicator for blockchain games. Why don't we pause here a bit and ask anyone from the audience whether want to join the conversation or ask anything? Feel free. In the meantime, I think we can also talk a bit because we are talking now more general things about the blockchain gaming industry. But I think a couple of interesting stuff happened with leading games like Splinterlands and Axie, right? Why don't
Yeah.
you walk us through a bit from what you wrote in the report about these steps?
So one thing for Axie that we should know is that it has, because of the hack that happened early during the year, they mastered severe pullbacks in their average unique active wallets that interacted with the game and the platform. But that decline has honestly started already at the beginning of the year, and have been slowly kind of decreasing. Compared to the previous quarter, they lost 40% of their user base, and a lot of people complained that the game became stagnant, and it was since SLP Potion just essentially became worthless. Like the value went from above $150 to less. But actually, it's not even like it's less than $1. It's just a few cents. For many people, playing the game became non-rentable. They had the land sale, but for the longest time, you couldn't do anything with the land. So finally, Skywave has decided, right, it's time to turn things around. Otherwise, this whole project is going to go belly up. So they first of all, this quarter they introduced land staking, and you stake your land, and it's basically like rent when people play on it, they interact with it. So you get a little, like a few AXS or Axis tokens. And depending on how popular or how rare your land is, your rewards can actually be significant by depending from 0.08 XAS to multiple XAS tokens. And that could be a daily reward of $420, which is, like, by all things considered, today earning
Yeah.
$420, that's pretty good.
I would take it. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for Axie, things played out a bit, yeah, bad in the first months. Like, if we remember, they launched the Katana decentralized exchange on Ronin, and they start the farming period of the Ron token. So this is where we see a really uptick in Axis activity towards the end of this last year and the beginning of this one. And from there, like the following also the trend of the entire industry, from there we go down, down, down. And then, of course, Running Bridge hack happened on March. That was a huge blow to the team. Basically, the only way to access their ecosystem was halted. So there was no way to interact with that unless you already have assets there. So there was no way to get new users, to get new players into their ecosystem, which is, you know, that it's really bad for a game. That situation, it's like for any business is bad, but for games specifically, it's really bad. Um, so that happened, but I think they are starting to turn the tide in their favor. Why? Because they finally launched the running bridge back. The running bridge back is back working. They enhanced their security finally. They launched a bug bounty program where again enhancing their security practices, and they also released land staking feature, which allow landowners to earn passive income in AXS, which is great also. But I think the most important development going on with Axie is that they finally launched their new battle system, which is the Origin. Axie Origin, it's, I mean, to be fair, like, yeah, I agree with most of people out there that Axie was becoming repetitive. It was becoming really idle. It was stopped being a fun game to play. So you don't want to get that label. So they launched Origin. The game is a bit more dynamic. The battles are require a bit more strategy, so it's a bit funnier. And I think that is going also to help Axie get their traction back. Hopefully, all things will fall in place because this is one of the most important games, not only for the sector, but it's one of the most important dApps representing blockchain in mainstream media. Let's remember how many people get to know blockchain games. It was because of Axie, the play to earn narrative that started to being popular in the Philippines. How people started to earn like $40, $50. Filipinos were really, really happy at that time. So it's good for the industry to have Axie back on track, and I think they are starting their recovery path, which is great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and the other important game that we all always talk about is Splinterlands. But something particular happened with Splinterlands on June, right?
Yeah. So with Splinterlands, to be honest, it shouldn't have surprised anybody. They announced in May that they're gonna revamp the reward system, and they finally implemented it. And unfortunately, uh, well, if just looking by raw numbers, it has not been a. I can't say if it has not been a wise decision, but it's a decision that impacted them negatively. To the tune of between this and last quarter, they lost 61% of their user base, which they are still the reigning king when it comes to blockchain games. They're one of the most played games right now, but their standing is significantly diminished. And the issue is that
they basically cut down the earning rates. So if you were earning, I don't know, like 30 or 40 SPS, the token of Splinterlands, they basically cut down to 10. Like, wow. And I mean, it's of course detrimental to the immediate usage of the app, right? So I don't know if you were going to mention like numbers because it's still one of the most played games in the industry. But I think they saw an important decrease in their blockchain activity.
absolutely they went from 283,000 average unique active wallets, and they fell down to 136,000. Well, nearly 137.
So half.
So
They
yeah,
cut the rewards to half, and half of the people also stop playing,
again,
right?
I wouldn't. Well, obviously, yeah, there has been a significant exodus of players, but I wouldn't say it was necessarily just players, because they didn't revamp the amount you could earn, but also how you could earn. The problem was that for a lot of people, they weren't really playing the game. What people were doing is that you got daily login rewards. You had
Yeah.
the ability to, I wouldn't say exploit, but the with relatively low effort, you could grind a few daily quests with starting decks, which were essentially nearly free, and not only recoup your initial losses of getting the starter deck, but start earning money on them as well. And it got to the point where just people weren't actually playing the game, trying to get better at the game or try to be competitive. It was more an, oh, I log in, I perform a few menial actions, and I get my excessive amount of, well, not excessive, but excessive compared to what you have to do amount of reward, and that's it. So a lot of idle players got shuffled out, and I would say the community that is there right now are the really dedicated and quote unquote true players that actually play and enjoy the game for what it is.
So the SPS that you could earn logging in and doing like it was 3 daily tasks were cut off. I think. So basically, it's only earning SPS and XP and Dark Energy crystals, the other in-game currency through battles. Like, and I mean, for me, Splinterland's still fun and it's going to survive, no question about it. The team behind has done tremendous job in building their own metaverse. They launch lands, which are not like the physical digital lands. Well, not physical, that the digital parcels that we know in Sandbox Central and so on. It's other type of land, but it's still land. They have really good partnerships. They partnered with Warner Bros. At the beginning of the year. Uh, I don't know what kind of music they are going to implement with Splinterlands at some point, but partnerships, really sustainable ecosystem, and most importantly, the game is fun. And when you are a new player in Splinterlands, and the entry point is also really low compared to other games, like you only need to spend like $7 in the initial summoner spellbook, a card required to start the game. And the pack of cards that you get as a new player are also, in my opinion, really fair. They allow you to compete fairly with players with more experience than you. That it's also important because there are games where also the gap between experienced players and newcomers is really hard to maintain, and that's not the case with Splinterland. So in all, I think like actually like it's really good to see these games thriving. While Splinterlands is a bit on a bump, I definitely think they are going to come back. Like, no, I mean, not sure if they are going to regain the 300 daily wallets connected, but I easily see them still as a top three, top five blockchain game throughout the end of the year.
All that remains to be seen. However, I still wish them all the best, and I hope they can recoup their losses very quickly.
Yeah. And finally, Boris, before we jump out, why don't we talk about the new game that it's increasing in Solana. We are seeing increased activity of this new game, Gameta, Gameta. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah,
Um,
not to be confused with the Polish fertility clinic, because you'll be surprised how many clicks I landed on that page looking for Gameta. Actually,
Funny.
no, Gameta is actually the biggest comparison I can draw is to Mobox. Essentially, Gameta is a fun box in of itself, so it's an ecosystem. You pay a nominal gas fee to connect it, but being on Solana, it will probably be like a few tens of dollars. That's about it.
Yeah.
And what you gain access to is a whole platform full of stuff. What kind of stuff do you get? Well, you get different blockchain games depending on and there's just a myriad to choose from. But you play games. The games have different play styles, different attributes, and that's one part. The other part is that you have different tools. So you have tools for making NFTs, tools for recording audio, for editing video, and other creative endeavors. So like painting or whatnot. So that's also what you gain access to. And finally, which I think is also very interesting, is that you have learn to earn features. So
Hmm.
they're basically dApps wherein you enter, and if anybody has learned the language and you're familiar with Duolingo, that's very similar to how it works. So basically, you complete daily quests, you finish tutorials, you learn whatever it is. A lot of their features focus on the NFT infrastructure or just crypto infrastructure. So they have like little tutorials of understanding how DeFi works, how this works, how other things work, and then after you watch the video or read the paragraphs, you get like a little test in the end. You pass the test and you earn an NFT or one of their two tokens. They have, and let me see where I have this written down.
Like
Um,
it's more like an entertainment platform that allows you to do all kind of stuff, like create music, NFTs, and so on, right?
yeah, so they have two tokens. They have a HIP token, which is like their standard token that you just you earn by doing things, and they have their W3G token, which you earn by investing money, and that's like the premium token. Uh,
Mm.
yeah. Well,
Okay.
basically, yeah, you can spend them on NFTs, and NFTs, it's a bit again like Mobox is a bit of a luck of a draw, and what you get is essentially you can imbue different items within a game or within a different dApp, and it increases the productivity, efficiency, or luck of your earnings. So you can, in luck, increases the like critical chance of you earning something bigger or like earning another NFT or earning a lot more money than you would. Efficiency is how often that you get a reward. And endurance is no, not endurance. I had it written there. Yeah, energy efficiency. So yeah, and energy defines how much you earn for a given time period.
Okay. I mean,
So yeah, it's very interesting in that sense. And I would say, yeah, it's the Mobox of Solana, and
yeah,
subjectively speaking, well worth the price of admission.
cool. Thanks for that. Um. All right. So just to start closing, games will remain one of the most exciting and promising categories or verticals from the blockchain industry. We talked about how talent is coming, big talent is coming to Web3 games, how money is flowing into the ecosystem, how games are still being played while their tokens are crashing 99%, games still being played. And the most importantly, the new wave of games like Illuvium, like Mirandus, like Embersword, that we are going to see, and the Gala ecosystem that we're going to see in the next months, I think will help a lot to attract a new wave of users. So, Boris, before we jump out, any final thoughts?
Uh, for myself, I am honestly not worried at the current state of blockchain games. Yes, we did have a I'd say showing cracks, but I think those are easily patched. And then again, it's summer. Summer is not the time when people are playing games. The weather is nice, everything is nice. So I think we're gonna see the real test of whether the bear market has affected us in the third and the fourth quarter, because those will be very defining.
Cool. And well, let's continue that conversation in Q3 to see what happened, if we were right or not. So I want to give a big thanks to all of you for your valuable questions. And today we didn't have one, but for being active at least in our community. Thank you, Boris, for your insights as always. And remember, each week at the same time, market movers discussing different trends and topics affecting the crypto market, and the DappRadar Meet sessions, where Ian talks down with relevant crypto projects in his AMA weekly events. And please don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter and social media channels on Twitter, Discord, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And that would be all for today. I want to wish you a lovely evening and have an amazing weekend. Thank you for listening.
All the best and have a pleasant rest of the day.
Likewise. Bye.